I have the honor of being the moderator of this webinar. I shall remind you that the webinar is being recorded and that we have a Q&A function and a chat function in which we encourage you to write questions and remarks as the webinar will proceed. My role here is just to provide 2 words about the meaning of this webinar, and then give the floor to my colleague, Professor Ejezi. This workshop is part of a broader ongoing effort led by UNECE on the Recovery Action Plan in Informal Settlements. And this project includes a document, the Recovery Action Plan itself, a series of online webinars, and a new online platform which will offer 2 free comprehensive online courses to deepen the knowledge of the plan. This platform will be open to you in the next few weeks. You will receive a link to join the courses if you're interested. The 2 courses are interrelated, and they will regard, on the one hand, the guidelines for the formalization of informal constructions, which will provide the basis also for a lot of the discussion today, and the Recovery Action Plan itself, its preparation and its implementation process. This workshop will explore instead the topic of kickstarting the Recovery Action Plan, how to bring things to a start with this very urgent area of action. With this, I will leave the floor to my colleague Alexandre Ejezi to present the agenda for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matteo, and it's a pleasure to be moderating with Matteo Tarantino this session. Very rich agenda that we have today. Very shortly, I give the floor to Mrs. Gulnara, Secretary of Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Land Management at UNECE. We will pass within a few minutes into the core of our discussions, 3 presentations that will encompass the importance of some of the elements that have been were presented by Matteo Tarantino in respect to COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan for Informal Settlements and how to help to implement a strategy for recovery, starting with Mr. Steven Nystrom, New Stream Company's former FIG Commission 9 chair. After that, we'll discuss with Professor Chrissy Potsiu the guidelines for formalization. We'll hear her presenting the guidelines for formalization of informal constructions and integrated with the Recovery Action Plan before passing the floor to Mr. Rick Roters, Director of UREG Advice, former Vice Chair of WPLA, on how land registration and cadastre can help in the recovery, taking stock of some of the how to integrate land registration and cadastre with formalization at the RAP. After that, we will take 5-minute break, 5 minutes break before passing the floor to the policymakers. We will start with the city of Tirana, with Mrs. Frida Pascal, Director of Territorial Development Control and the Municipality of Tirana. After Mrs. Pashako, we will give the floor to Mr. Milan Barovic, Head of Secretariat for Spatial Planning and Sustainable Development of Municipality of Podgorica, who will be joined by Mrs. Branka Knevic, Deputy Secretary of the Secretariat for Spatial Planning and Sustainable Development at the Municipality of Podgorica. And we will finish this part of the discussion, which is really taking stock of what is happening on the ground, with Mr. Darko Vucetic, Head of Center of Geospatial Information Management, Republic Geodetic Authority of the Republic of Serbia. Finally, we will leave some room for discussion. As Matteo Tarantino might have mentioned, please use the chat room for your questions and answers, and we'll bring them up within the discussion slots that we have today. Without further ado, I give you the floor, Mrs. Gonora Roll for your introduction and setting up the agenda of today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alexander. Thank you so much for giving the floor to open this workshop. I would like to use this opportunity to also thank you at University of Geneva and all the organizers of the workshop, but also all the representatives of the cities who joined us today for this workshop. The COVID-19 pandemic, I think it showed a lot that the poor housing conditions for the vulnerable groups of the populations are especially difficult in informal settlements. And this is where our work actually expanded into the development of the COVID-19 Regional Action Plan on informal settlements. So we started this project last year. So we would like to use this, I would like to use the opportunity to thank again representatives of Albania, Montenegro, North Macedonia, Serbia, and Bosnia and Herzegovina for the cooperation and also for participation today. This regional action plan that was developed last year and this year was endorsed first by the Working Party on Land Administration session and then by the Committee on Urban Development, Housing and Management. It's really a very comprehensive document. I'm very pleased to hear already from governments that it is a useful document. I think it's a useful document because it incorporated lots of expertise from academia, so from the experts who are speaking today. So I would like to use also again this opportunity to thank Chrissy, Rick, and Stephen. I mean, Alexander, you and Matteo and all colleagues who actually put so much efforts into discussing and incorporating all these little pieces which were important for the development of this regional action plan. I think it is really a strong document because it has inputs of hundreds and hundreds of people. And I'm very glad that this workshop is about implementation. And we just came actually from the COP in Glasgow. We were there last week. And I think this is kind of the main topic that we developed lots of concepts, we developed lots of plans. This is a time for actions. This is a time for the implementation. So again, I'm very glad that even due to the unfortunate circumstances of the COVID-19 pandemic, it was possible to restart and expand our work on the informal settlements. But indeed, thanks to that, we were able to launch this project. So I would like to propose that we all use this very good opportunity to implement that regional action plan very effectively in all the cities and all the countries which are involved in this project, but also across the whole region, and try to build back better. Try to use this opportunity actually for finding innovative solutions, those which are proposed by this regional action plan, but also those which are proposed in different other research projects and activities. So looking very much forward to hearing from our international experts and especially from the cities and the national governments who will be speaking today. So we know that there are already a series of online lectures, so we really hope that this workshop also will contribute to additional online resources, which we hope that will be useful for these countries, but also for other countries. So thank you again to all and looking forward for this very exciting meeting today.
Thank you very much, Gunara. This indeed is a very important impetus that we have all we're very excited and very motivated as a result of some of the impacts that we saw of the COVID and how we can improve things and build back better is one of the threads of this work. It is, the timing could not be better, and it's very important to now listen to the experts. Stephen, you're the first expert we would want to hear from and explain your insight and your work and the way you analyze the recovery action plan for informal settlements and how to better implement the strategy for recovery. The floor is yours, Stephen.
Good morning from Florida, everyone. It's just before 9 o'clock, and bear with me one second. Trying to. Okay, sorry, the screen sharing. Apparently, there's too many documents open.
While Stephen is having sharing his documents, maybe no, it's here you go. I just wanted to mention that
Okay, can you see the can you see it now? Or did I not share it?
Yes, it might not be the document. Yes.
Well, this worked a moment ago.
Do we have this presentation?
Stephen, if you can't find it, I can share your presentation for you.
Let me just try one more time.
While we are trying to get the presentation, Stephen's presentation is about to showcase and explain how everything is connected, the recovery action plan strategy, framework, and all the cross-cutting themes of implementation. So this is an important insight that we'll share with you very shortly.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Stephen Nystrom. I am the president of Newstream Companies. I'm a land and growth economist, and I'm one of the primary authors of the Guidelines for Formalization, as well as the Recovery Action Plan. I'm a valuer as well and a judge in tax appeal court, and that's my background in land administration, as well as many years with FIG and a Commission 9 chair in the past. And Amy, could you please share for me? I do not know why it's not on the list of items to share, and that is rather concerning. Let me know when you're there.
Sure, Stephen, I'm just going to bring it up now.
Yeah, still trying on my end. It's just not. It's not one of the options. Okay. And can you go ahead and do full screen on that when you can? Thank you. Okay, the next slide, please. One more. Okay, so this is the structure of the COVID-19 Recovery Action Plan, and unfortunately, I went a few minutes in there, so I'm going to have to go a little quicker. The Recovery Action Plan has 9 broad policy areas, and each one of them has a main goal. Under each of these goals are secondary goals, and each one of the 9 policy areas, they're very broad topics. You can see the 9 policy areas below. Each one of those secondary goals has a number of, each one of those policy areas has a main goal and then a handful of secondary goals underneath that. Below that, there are actions, individual actions by which you can generally reach those secondary goals. And if you reach the secondary goal, if you accomplish most of the actions, reach the secondary goals and the targets, that pretty much means you've reached the main goal. And that is the, you'll note that the list of policy areas is extremely broad, with Chrissy and Rick mostly speaking about policy area 1, which is covered heavily in our book, The Guidelines for Formalization, and that's geospatial, land rights, tenure, resource allocation, and justice. Some of that is also covered in policy area 9, buildings, construction, and land planning, but you'll note a lot of other policy areas work and discuss very importance of your society and very important aspects of your society and culture. They discuss very important aspects within the umbrella of the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. And so we're actually covering a very large, we're discussing actions to make more effective and efficient very large portions of your society and culture while building resilience and mitigating the damage of COVID-19 while also working towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. If you could go back one slide, please. Okay, so the Recovery Action Plan there for informal settlements is noted in the middle there. And that is the publication that we worked on and that we're talking about today, and focusing on implementation, but I want to give you a background first. So around this document are 6 policy briefs. I do believe 5 of them are actually getting published. They're not all finished at the moment, but you'll note, and these were other experts at the United Nations and probably a broader group of academia as well, but mostly covering those core topics in a bit greater detail than we cover within the Recovery Action Plan. However, for the most part, we're very, it all fits together very well. So we've got the policy briefs for food, nature-based solutions, innovative finance and PPP. We have water and sanitation, energy and building standards, and urban mobility. And some of that information I had when I was helping craft the various actions and targets and goals. And some of it, I wrote my sections first and they got copies of my stuff, and then they probably considered that as they were writing their own policy briefs. For each one of the cities that we knew initially and probably going forward, there's a city assessment report as well down there at the bottom left. And so what we have is a recovery action plan, which covers the broad topics. We have 5 or 6 policy briefs, which is a bit more detail into the individual ones, so additional books. All this should be available online once they're finished. And then city assessment reports. And from all that comes a recovery action plan that's specific for the informal settlement, city, region, and country that we're specifically talking about. And there's other reference materials as well. As Matteo mentioned, we're going to have a lecture series. We have one already, mostly finished, on the guidelines for formalization. There's another one in the works as well. Could you scroll down, please? Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so timing in the recovery action plan. We have a section that talks about timing, and this is, so there's various goals, sub-goals, targets, and actions. And when we're talking about these things, we talk about essentially how quickly they can be or should be accomplished. And when we have, and we'll have, you know, a red, gold, green, or blue, talking more about the timing of how long it would take to accomplish than the specific priority of the item itself. So formalization takes a long time. So for the typical country in the region, it may be more of a green and blue, a longer term 6 months to 5-year project, as opposed to something that can be accomplished in 6 months. Like red is are the ones you could accomplish quickly. So when we talk about the timing, it's more about how long it will take to implement than it is on the importance, because the importance of any specific item is going to vary from place to place. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is essentially an example of first policy area going to be more heavily covered by Chrissy and Rick on geospatial, land rights, tenure, resource allocation, and justice, covered more heavily by our prior book as well. And you'll note there's a goal that informal settlements are formalized and brought into the formal markets, just, efficient, sustainable manner, allowing for the broader socioeconomic process, justice, and empowerment of the people. And there's the 4 sub-goals, the targets underneath that, and there would be 15 or 20 actions specifically underneath that. And that's how you read and utilize the recovery action plan. That's not necessarily how you implement, which I'll be getting to very soon. So next slide, please. Policy area 2, involvement of local communities and local action. We're talking about coordinating with city level team, responding to the pandemic in coordination with government ministries, medical, professional, aid organizations of all kinds. Once again, we have a number of targets and actions underneath that. I'll refer to the book. There will be a lecture series which will talk about each of the policy areas individually, and we will go deeply into these targets and these actions, which we do not have time for in a 20-minute presentation today. Next slide, please. So policy area 3, basic needs, telecommunication, basic data needs, telecommunication and information technology. Once again, same format. Don't have time to go through each of the policy areas, but I did have a slide for each. Next slide, please. Policy area 4, physical infrastructure, water and energy services. So this is the physical infrastructure where we talk about how you can build resilience and protect against COVID-19, as well as, achieving many of the sustainable development goals are related to policy area 4. Next slide, please. Policy area 5 is more along your social infrastructure and your social services. So there were a lot of targets and goals here. It is a very broad and very important topic. So there are a lot of actions under this one as well. Once again, referring to the main document, which you should get a copy of. Next slide, please. Policy area 6 was stay-at-home recommendations, culture and vulnerable groups. An important topic as well. And we discuss how the Recovery Action Plan and resilience can be boosted by addressing some of those issues and how we handle what actions we can take to further that. Next slide, please. Food, basic consumption and distribution. Once again, the goals and the targets and the actions to meet those needs to build resilience, protection against COVID-19. Next slide, please. Green spaces, recreation and social events. Not as many targets and actions here. Next slide, please. And the last one, building construction and land planning. There's specific risks posed by these large public facilities, informal homes and other constructions. And so we have 3 targets and 8 or 10 or more actions specifically underneath that to minimize those damage and to build resilience. I apologize for going so quickly through this, but I wanted to put a lot of my presentation into the implementation, which whereas all of this is described in very good detail within the guide itself, within the Recovery Action Plan. Next slide, please. Okay, so this goes back and shows you once again the broad, all the 9 policy areas, how broad this is. And the structure, once again, just to keep in mind, we have a main goal, targets, which are secondary goals, and actions underneath each one to achieve those secondary goals and thus the main goals as well. Next slide, please. This is why, when talking about implementation, I want to mention that there are a variety of informal settlements and different and how they should be planned. The implementation plan should be very different. Differing responses are required to solve the problems that stem from informality. And the reason why one set of implementation is not the only way to do this is because of the great variety of informal developments that we have. My slide actually had a little bit in here highlighted, but here's 4 examples of informality. The number 4 there. If you had low quality informality with lots of legal, physical, and limitations on data, that's very different than the example number 1, where you have widespread informality, but it's of generally good quality, and really your planning and your infrastructure and your mapping may be your issues. And then you may have, like example 2, people building on government and environmentally sensitive land, and your major legal complications. And number 3, where the land may be legal, but the problem is that it's environmentally sensitive and that it's growing, and that there's no good land administration, land planning solution to the problem to stop it from becoming an even bigger problem over time. So all 4 of these would require very different consideration of what is important and what is not. It's tier 1 and tier 2, and how it should be implemented, because the problems are so very different, not to mention the fact that society, culture, and socioeconomic levels are also different. Next slide, please. We're going to talk about cost-benefit analysis. I just wanted to mention that we have, you can look at it from several different ways. I have Christy and I have a publication that goes into great detail, but here we have, when you look at it, you can look at it from a pestle viewpoint. You can look at it from which is environmental, political, economic, social, technological, and legislative. You should consider those factors, or from strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, SWOT. These can be looked up online. Next slide, please. We do have another lecture in the strategy phase. It's a lecture online for part of the guidelines for formalization that does talk more about the cost benefit studies. So I refer you to that. But a very simple way of looking at cost benefits is just to look at the costs and the benefits separately, like two categories, like you choose for anything, and then decide, are these benefits and costs going to happen in the beginning, or are the benefits or costs going to happen at the end, and then decide how that's going to play out. That's a much simpler way of looking at it. Next slide, please. Okay, so wrap implementation. Now I have 12 minutes, but there were a couple, I thought I'm 12 minutes in, but there were a couple of minutes of setup. So please let me know if I'm going to be cut off, at least with a 2-minute warning. I'm acting like I've got 7 more minutes.
Stephen, I'm giving you 5 minutes warning. You have 5 minutes to go.
5, thank you. Okay, so probably going to put it all right here then. We talked about the cost benefit analysis. It's not all about money, it's about value. I want you to understand, even though I'm background as an economist, I'm talking about more than just money. You want to look at the local goals and targets, all of those goals, sub-goals, and the individual actions, and you need to compare them to your local realities. Decide what is easy, hard, or impossible. Think about why. Also think about if other aid agencies and such can assist, or other ways to overcome those obstacles. The next step on that, on the implementation side, is understand what resources are available, and under different scenarios, if you take different paths forward, how will your resources change? You're going to have to consider resources early in this process of implementing, and you're going to have to reanalyze it later in the process as you refine what you're going to do. So then you have to look at the individual policy goals, targets, and actions, and think about the costs and the benefits of working on the individual ones. Some are going to be very important, some are going to be less important, but the costs are going to be different too. And you want to start looking at the net benefits. And I don't mean just economic benefits, but I also mean other types of benefits as well, political benefits, political costs and such, and all of the other aspects that actually are both costs and the benefits. The next step in the process is you have to make your implementation decisions. So you've considered all the costs and the benefits, you've looked at all of the actions and targets, and now you have to decide what you're going to do. And you can look at the tier 1 and tier 2 in 2 different ways. Tier 1 is maybe the most important ones, or the ones you want to do quickly because you can. Tier 2 can be the more difficult ones, or the ones that just take a lot more time. So there's a couple different ways you can look at tier 1 and tier 2. But as you're making your decisions, you should start breaking the categories up into how you're going to progress forward. Those, once again, should be based on your net benefits and the realities and resources and political and public will. So after you reach that point in your implementation, you need to develop a strategic implementation plan, carefully considering the timing of your interventions and the political and public will and your resources. So that's the next step. Now you've got you've got the plan worked out, so you begin your implementation at that point. You have to be prepared to adjust tactically if possible. Certain things are not going to work out well, other things are going to work out even better. So you should be ready to re-examine at some stage of this implementation. You should re-examine to decide whether or not some adjustments need to be made. When you can, the next step is you take your easy victories where you can. The more actions you succeed at, the more targets you accomplish, the greater the benefits there will be to the other ones. Each one of these, all of these factors are interlocking. You start fixing some issues and some problems, strengthening your the background of your socioeconomic puzzle, and the whole system works better. So take your victories when you can, and those victories can help sustain your project. After you've gone through the first round, you will have succeeded at some of them, you will have put off others, and then you should think about a second and third round to accomplish more of these issues, and take into account that that some of the most very, very difficult ones to accomplish will be at the end. Please, very quickly, the next slide. Okay, so there's a couple of cross-sectoral, cross-cutting themes, which I changed the title on the other presentation, that should be considered. Problem identification is going to be key in all of this. Data gathering is going to be key in all of this. Planning within your available resources and socio-political realities is going to be key in all of this. You want a flexible strategy, comprehensive data, and you want to be realistic in looking at the problem. Next slide. Next slide, please. Thank you. The last two are, you want to be communication, obtaining and retaining political and social will is very key. you want to be very, very, very crucial to this. I cannot overstate that. You want to make sure that you're communicating in a way that's effective. And if things start going sideways on this front, you need to be ready to adapt, because things will sometimes go sideways, and you really do need to be prepared for that. The very last one, and then I'll be done. You want to kind of cover that. You need a balanced and flexible adaptation to the existing circumstances. So when things change, you got to be ready to move and ready to alter your plan a bit. And this includes sustaining will, resources, and funding. And next slide. Thank you very much for your time and attention. I do apologize for wasting this first couple of minutes, and I return the floor.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Very insightful analysis that you have here for us. Adaptation is indeed very important, and it could be also a very nice segue into Professor Putsiu has to share with us in terms of the integration of the guidelines for formalization of informal constructions with the Recovery Action Plan. Chrissy, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you see here? Yes. In the next 20 minutes, I will try to give you, to the newcomers, some background information about the research we're doing in formalization of informal settlements. And I will give you a brief description of the overall process of formalization. Where does the RAP, the Recovery Action Plan, fit within the overall process, and how these two publications complement each other and how to implement in parallel, and then some anticipated common challenges that people will face. Now, we have started the research since many years, since 2007. So you can see here the three publications about informal settlements, and mainly when we are talking about informal constructions, we mean constructions that are lacking just a minute, that are lacking lacking planning and building permits, and lacking property titles as well, maybe or maybe not, but or are built in excess of such permits. Mostly they are residential real estate, but not exclusively. We have various types, from small, medium-sized, or very complex buildings. Some of them are self-made, some of them made by constructors. And also what I have here in boxes, what we need to remember from each slide, that we need here to remember that housing is important, that the number of informal constructions shows that there is something in our land administration, land management system that makes it the housing provision very complex and difficult task. And when neither the state nor the private sector provide the appropriate supply, people build informally, but according to the United Nations Sustainable Development Agenda 2030 and all other publications that we all know, we have to empower the residents of informal settlements. So we need to understand here that not only constructions are informal, but also residents may lack also documentation and registration. And this is very important because they all depend on a daily income. Now, what we have identified is that there is a multiple social, economic, and environmental impact. You can see information, detailed information in lectures 1, 2, and 3. And we also emphasize the value of title issue in recognizing informal rights and provide titles, and also provide property registration in lecture 5. And what we need to remember here is that recognition of existing rights and title issuing and registration empowers the residents of informal settlements, because they improve security against land grabbing, they can improve living conditions, they can create, we can create marketable property units, so residents may move around, may rent if they want, they take advantage of the investment on informal construction. And we can minimize lending risks and provide funding for also further improvements. So all this is empowerment of residents, and also we provide the spatial data infrastructure necessary so that we will take evidence-based decisions for interventions and for provision of humanitarian support. So this is what is important. And of course, we mentioned here that improvements both of constructions and neighborhoods are important. If we don't formalize decent resettlement and treatment of the debris is important. And we go on the next slide, where here we are today. Today, COVID-19 has appeared and is a new global challenge, but it has a greater impact on informal settlements. Fortunately, we are ready with a guide, the Recovery Action Plan. And where are we now? Now we need to agree on how we will implement the formalization and the RAP in parallel in order to achieve resilience for the pandemic, against the pandemic, and to build back better. And for that, we need to prioritize according to the risks. So we need to identify the risks. This is very important. And the most important of all the risks, because we have several disasters, the most important is the pandemic risk. So what we need to remember here is that we should formalize all existing informal settlements that can be formalized. Otherwise, we need to resettle. Why? Because we need to be in time with the Sustainable Development Goals achievement. And why now? Because COVID is an additional challenge. It is anticipated that we will have globally more than 150 million new poor that will be settled probably in informal settlements. And the residents there are more vulnerable, and to keep in mind that the pandemic does not recognize legal or physical boundaries, and restoring global health is an uppermost priority. So very briefly, I hope that many of you that you have seen the guidelines, you remember this graph here, which is the procedure for formalization. You can here listen the lectures on why to formalize and the overall process, the lectures 2 and 3 about the strategy, lecture 4 about how to prepare the framework and how to implement the formalization, lecture 5 about how to have inclusive property registration, 6 and 7 how to improve in parallel and after the formalization. The important thing is here that the guidelines focus, give an emphasis on how to formalize the titles, how to clear out the whole situation and how to provide clear titles. And we do not give detailed instructions on how to do parallel actions to improve the constructions and the settlements, and what to do in future, because first of all, this was outside of the scope of this publication, but also because there is a big variety of informal settlements, and that the risks are not the same, as Stephen said, in each informal settlement. Therefore, we need to do separate plans. So what we need to remember is that building back better is a long-term task. All countries are building back better, not even informal settlements. So we need to pay attention to registration, planning, infrastructure, affordable housing, valuation, taxation, real estate market functioning, funding mechanism, education, and the private sector, and most important, ethics, professional ethics, that all countries work on that. Now, what to remember when you prepare the formalization strategy, much of that was mentioned also by Stephen, to analyze the problem, to prepare a background paper about the causes, the size, the type, the location, and the extent of informal settlements, to gain the political support and raise awareness among society, to prepare an inventory-based map, orthophoto map, a GIS, and classify the land use types as well as the construction types that can be legalized in a simple way, to to collect the data about the population and the residents. Here also, or when you implement in parallel with RAP, then you have to collect more data referring to the vulnerability of the society and the exposure to the pandemic. Then to make a cost-benefit analysis, as Stephen said, the important thing is to make it clear for the politicians the expected benefits, but also the quick wins. These is what politicians pay most attention there, quick wins. Then to agree for a fit-for-purpose formalization process and prioritizations of actions, and then to develop a communication plan to draft a strategy and get approval. Now, what to remember when you implement is to define the zones, the formalization zones, and the various categories. And don't forget that you need to preserve the protected areas, both within and outside of those formalization zones. Then to identify the legal informality. For this, this is important because it is the title issuing and the issuing of planning amnesty, and for that you need a political decision. This is a very serious topic. Then to identify the technical, the construction informality. This is non-compliance with the standards, the accepted standards, for everything, for ventilation, for example, in the buildings, for seismic safety, and then to classify the risks of the construction informality, and then to plan for inspections. The concept here is to avoid on-site inspections as much as possible. So this means that you provide operational permit for small or mid-sized constructions without inspections, but you should ensure that occupants accept the risks and are aware of the actions to be taken for the safety. Of course, for complex buildings, inspections are important. Then you standardize the documents and the procedures. Then you proceed with the registration process. You define the registration process. Pay attention that property titles and transactions should not be legally bound with any planning and construction requirements. Then define the administration system and all the technical facilities necessary to support the formalization project. Determine the levels of penalties and fees. Affordability is important, and prepare the legal framework. Now, what to remember when you actually start the formalization is that you have to receive the process and to receive and process the applications and the documents, to collect the penalties and fees. Try to be affordable, both for title issuing and for all certificates. Provide it electronically, avoid bureaucracy, register the constructions in a simple, fast manner, avoid special evidence lists and complicated lists. Just provide the titles and register. And you don't need to mention also the pending inspections and the pending building permits on the property title. This is something totally different. And provide titles and allow for transactions and mortgages, even if the construction is of poor quality, because this may be fixed later by the new owner. Or and then monitor the process and try to make all necessary adjustments. And what also is important is that you should address all legal issues. And sometimes this cannot be legally done very easily, but also you should consider mitigation procedures to solve these legal issues. Now, let's go further. About some more information from my side, how to prepare the pandemic risk reduction plan. For that, you need to be based on the exposure to the pandemic and to the society's vulnerability. You have to read and follow the national directions about the pandemic, of course. Then you have to collect all historical, geospatial, and demographic data, and take advantage of your experience, the 2-year experience from this COVID-19 pandemic, to estimate the risk in the various informal zones, always in relation to the progress of formalization. That's why you should you should merge the projects and work in parallel and exchange the information. And assess and identify the municipal resources for all sectors, including human resources, technical resources, medical resources, whatever. Then identify the risks and classify according to the vulnerability in the project into low, mid, and high risk zones, the informal zones that you formalize. You have to classify the risk, then to ensure and identify any possible donors. Then identify the current available geospatial data sources, use the inventory for informal constructions to add the data, the additional data as I said earlier, and also add some key landmarks and the service networks, for example, the clinics, the hospitals, whatever. I mark there on this base map the areas that pose greater risk, map the safe green areas, map the buildings that are frequently used that need interventions, then understand what is already done according to the 9 policy areas and the formalization, and how to go from now until the end of the pandemic, and what is the reality? What is the reality in numbers, affected people, and economic damage? This is really important. And then recognize how much residual extensive risk is in front of you in terms of the ongoing projects, and what is more needed. Legal issues are here important. Legal issues not only for making interventions for infrastructure, but also for implementing the measures, for example, mandatory vaccines or whatever. Legal issues are important to minimize the residual risk. Then prioritize in terms of feasibility study, as Stephen said, and then arrange the budget allocation, internal and external funds, identify responsible organizations. Usually we establish an emergency operational center in the municipality. I guess that most of you have this. And confirm the pandemic risk reduction plan with relevant authorities. And now here, very briefly, I want to tell you, this is the flow chart of the formalization. And then when you prepare here the strategy for formalization, you prepare the local pandemic risk reduction plan, and you prioritize the actions in a fit for purpose way. You prepare also communication plan, strategy report, again, the same thing, but you include also the RAP here. Then when you prepare the framework for the formalization, you have to also to define the pandemic risk in the various zones and the various buildings, the various types of constructions, and to define the legal and regulatory issues, to define the appropriate implementation actions, to establish, as I said, the emergency operational center in the municipality, and to define the penalties again here in terms of the measures you implement for the pandemic and the involved institutions. And then when you come to the implementation of the measures, here, of course, you work in a similar way. You prepare the geospatial plans, you identify the routes, the buildings, the spaces, etc., etc. But of course, you have to monitor, and here you have to modify in a daily manner. And of course, you have to do some training. And here I want to mention again, to repeat again, that both formalization and the recovery action plan from the pandemic are complex problems, and corruption is always there. And this instinct is usually not to do anything, but so we have to pay attention on this topic. We have to pay attention on the multiplicity of authorities involved and the overlapping responsibilities. Of course, we have to develop the strategy, the timetable to prioritize and all that. Please do not try to solve everything at once. This is, I'm sorry to say, but this is impossible, and it comes to be stupid. So attention should be made to the legislation revisions that are needed for both topics. Usually we say that we have weak capacity, but the problem is not the weakness. We have experts, but the problem is to identify these local experts and to involve these local experts. And also we say we have lack of funding, but usually we have difficulty in aligning funding. So this is important. We need to simplify, don't forget to simplify the problems for the politicians and to show to them the benefits they expect and the very fast benefits. quick wins, as I said earlier. We need to do best use of the technology, fit for purpose approach, crowdsourcing techniques, whatever. Because it is a participatory process, we need to address the underlying constraints. These are very crucial: political, ethical, cultural, religious, legal, administrative, institutional. It's a difficult task. All these are challenges because we have to overcome the established practice and the established ethics and whatever in order to fix these problems. We have to care about the involvement of the private sector and the establishment of public-private partnerships for certain functions, to engage the society, as Stephen said, and to develop the local disaster risk reduction plans for systematic building back better. And this is what I had to say in a very brief way. Again, to remind to you not to try to solve everything at once, and to remember what Albert Einstein said: learn from yesterday, live for today, and hope for tomorrow. And the important thing is not to stop questioning. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chrissy. Very detailed sets of information and insight and analysis on how to best integrate the guidelines for formalization with the recovery action. This will help us to connect with what is going to follow. I have to announce a change in our agenda. Before Rick Wouters take the floor, I want to give the floor to Mrs. Frida Pashako from City of Tirana, Municipality of Tirana. Because of the change of the schedule, the mayor of Tirana has asked her to join. So please, Ms. Pashako, the floor is yours to share with us, also if connected with what we have heard, the perspectives of informal settlements in the city of Tirana.
Thank you, Alexander. Thank you for the change. We have a meeting with the mayor, so I apologize for this change, and I thank you for your disponibility to change. I have here a small presentation. I hope that you can see it. It's okay for everyone. Okay. For this presentation, I selected 3 sites in Tirana, possible site for action. This site are in informal area, and our challenge is, of course, the requalification and urbanization of these informal areas. And based on the goals of our general local plan, we have the topic and the big goals to transform the city of Tirana in a polycentric city. So these 3 sites are already identified as neighborhood, important neighborhood of the city, but are developed through the process of informality, and but they are in a very strategic location for the development of our city. This is the first area. This is called Pesmai. This site is in the north area of the Tirana, and it is bounded by the Tirana River. As you can see, this is the situation just some months before, because actually this is a big site construction area in which we are developing a master plan for the rehabilitation of this area. The new master plan came after the necessity of reconstruction after the earthquake, but it was an opportunity. So starting from a crisis, we thought that it is a big opportunity for the city to provide not only shelters for the people that lose their own home, but to create new polycentric city, so to create new poles for the city, to create a new neighborhood in which we can somehow make good land management, give new function, not only housing, but recreational area, and oriented to host different groups, so for social diversity. Here we have the vision for the development of this area, and as you can see, the topic is, or let's say it is on the smart keywords. So this idea of the IT school based on the model of Ecole 42. So we have always on even the idea to implement a good and sustainable connection with the nature through the 5 main district, and the connection with the park that is close to the river. Based on this, we have the challenge and the goal to develop an affordable district, so in which we can host new family and a kind of population groups that are interested in develop this kind of activities. So the activities that are around the idea of the smart city. And walkable district, the idea of a dynamic and productive creativity, so the Fab Lab and the Industry 4.0. Of course, the accessibility of this area, and this is as we are developing now. So after the earthquake disaster and the pandemic, so in the area of post-earthquake and pandemic, we think that we can reach new standard for the health, security, and somehow be a guarantee for a new way of living and working in this new district. Of course, the minimum standards and based on the Euro code, and of course to be prepared for another emergency situation or even for a possible pandemic outbreak. The other side is in the opposite part of the city. It is in the west part of the city. It's called the Combinati side. As you can see here, the situation is a little bit complicated because we have an original factory developed, Lenin factory developed during the communism period. Around it or in front of it, we have again a neighborhood for the worker of this factory, again developed around 1950, and then everywhere, even in the middle of this very well defined development made during the communism, we have informal settings that grow up everywhere. This is one of the other sides that we decided that would be the new neighborhood. This is the master plan, in which again we include the reconstruction for the post earthquake and pandemic, but even the idea to generate a new neighborhood, this time based on a mixed function, cultural, institution, services, open spaces, and the academic hub, because we want here to develop the educational, different educational institutions to be located here and to empower the fields of architecture, art, and design in order to host not only the young people or the young family that are involved in this field that live already in this city, but even to host people from the region that are interested to live in this academic and artistic hub. The other side that we have, it's again in the north east of the city, and it's already in the middle. You can see it's already university campus, agricultural university campus, but during the, let's say, the informal period of development, this public land was occupied all around by informal houses. So we have inside a big portion of land that belongs totally to the public government. Now we have a mixity between all these buildings that continues to be institutional, so to host faculty or dormitory or every kind of activity that is related with the university, and all around a development that is informal. So again, we thought that it can be the occasion to transform this area in a kind of organic development between what is dedicated to the student and which can be part of a new neighborhood that is all dedicated to move people that live in other parts of the city, but even to accommodate those that occupied before in an informal way this part of the land. So these are projects that in process. We have all these three areas that now are under construction. We have started with some portion, not all the land, starting with the expropriation. And after the expropriation, we will have in this building the people that earn this apartment from the reconstruction process or the reconstruction program due to the fact that they lose their own home by the earthquake. The people that have legalized their house and but they have even the land, again, they will be accommodated here with the same number of the meter square that they have already legalized. And even they will have the percentage for the land that it's of own property. For those that are under the process, but they have not finished the process of legalization, they will have only the same meter square of house that they have already before. So we have in this moment a law, a national law that gives us the possibility to go through this process of reconstruction. That it's, as I explained, not only for the post-earthquake reaction, but it's even a process more complicated and organically developed in order to accommodate and to regenerate and to give a new development to this area that had before an informal development. So to go through informal development of some areas of the city into a master plan in accommodating people that was touched by the earthquake, people that are legal owner of the houses and of the land, but even those that are under the process of reconstruction. So in this way to redevelop this area with this instrument, even legal instrument. In this area, as I said, it's more dedicated, as this is an agricultural university, it was part of the agricultural research. So the idea is the vision even to implement the collaboration. You can see here, there is a lot of green area that are part of the labs and spaces that the University of Agriculture needs to make them at the experiments or the different researches in different fields. And again, to reach one of the important points of our general local plan, so to go through a process of a polycentric city. Again, well, as I said before, it's an important step, the social inclusions, and to to transform an informal settlements in new neighborhood that accommodate and put together students, professors, researchers, and the female families that, of course, are affected by the earthquake, but even the families that already live there in these informal settlements. So, what we can or how we can implement some of the recommendation of the recovery plan, we think that we can somehow interconnect these three big developments that we are already facing and trying to management, because are huge. So it's not part only of my directory. We are collaborating with the colleagues of other directory to make possible this. But the idea is that the recovery plan can be very well implemented in these three big new areas of our city. Of course, as I said, address the multidimensional complexity of this settlement and to make a collaboration with the multifaceted plan, go through a process of urbanization of this informal area in order even to provide public services and to create mixity between housing and other function of the city, to establish a closer communication between the citizens and the need of housing right and urbanization, of course, even the adaptation with the COVID-19 strategies, and that should be part of the future development of our city, and post-pandemic measure in correlation with the social and of the urban environment. This is shortly what we are doing, and I hope to have been clear, even if are very condensed as information.
Thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Pashako. This is a very interesting experience and case study that you're bringing us from the city of Tirana. From, if I put my hat of city planner, you'd clearly bring in the multiple capitals that are needed within this recovery and make the recovery in line with the building back better, the human capital, the environmental capital, the societal capital, and economic capital. And this is precisely something that we will come back within the question and answer. And I remind our colleagues from the city of Tirana to stay with us so that if there's any question on the case of Tirana in the absence of Mrs. Pashako, we can answer to those questions. Thank you again for your time. Thanks everyone for the your flexibility. And I want to give the floor now to Rick Wouters. Rick, the floor is yours to share with us your insight on land registration and cadastre and how it can help in the recovery by integrating both the registration and cadastre with the formalization and the RAP. The floor is yours, Rick.
Okay, thank you very much, Alexander, for this introduction. As you said, my name is Rick Wouters and I'm staff member of Cadasta and the National Registry in the Netherlands. For 25 years, I'm in my pre-retirement phase right now. In this presentation, we try to answer the following questions. Why is land administration so important? What are key registers and why do we need them? How to acquire relevant data and how to build a land administration. I realized that in the Balkan, we have already many good examples of land administrations. Later on, we will have a presentation from Darko Vucetic. So what I will explain here is for the framework, and later on we will see real life, and that is very interesting, I'm sure. Some terminology, because there is quite a lot of confusion about terms. In this presentation, we see Cadastre as the register of real estate objects, land parcels, buildings, dwellings, pipelines, etc. the land register registration of real estate titles like ownership, lease, mortgage, usufruct, and many more. The cadastral map as the graphical representation of the location of a parcel, a building, of a pipeline, etc. And then land administration is in fact a combination of all three, or sometimes only two, or even one of them.
Rick, sorry to interrupt. We don't see your screen. If you can share it.
Oh, sorry. Let me check. Yeah, is it there now?
Yes, thank you.
Oh, okay, good that you said that.
And if you can go to the full screen, that would be.
Yes,
good.
of course. Yep. Okay, good. So, and then we have this term land registry. And in most cases, that is the organization responsible for the recording of the data and sharing of the information. Okay, I click some information. Okay, and we also know the term Cadasta, so that might be sometimes confusing. In the Netherlands, we call our organization Cadasta, but in England, for instance, the Land Registry, and they have both the same tasks to maintain the Cadasta and the Land Register. In some countries, like in Croatia, you even have two organizations, a Cadasta and a Land Registry, separated, and they work together to jointly assure that data on properties, owners, and real estate are available to the customer and to the citizens. Some other relevant terminology: land tenure, that is the legal regime in which land is owned by an individual, the landholder or the owner. Tenure security, an important term, the certainty that a person's right to land will be recognized by others and protected in cases of specific challenges. Titling is the process of assigning real estate titles to a person and recording them in a land registry. And the formalization, in fact, is the action to officially register a real estate object as a legally owned property. Then a more specific term is the key register, which is a state register that contains high quality data maintained by the so-called custodian. And synonyms are basic register or authentic register. And then the last term, and that is NSDI, that is the National Spatial Data Infrastructure, which is a technology, policy, standards, and human resources necessary to acquire, process, store, distribute, and improve utilization of geospatial data. Okay, so let's have a quick look at Cadasta and the Land Register. Typically, the Cadasta contains information on a parcel, the size of the parcel, whether it is built or unbuilt, the user or the owner of the parcel, tax income, the tax value, the reference to a mortgage, and sometimes more information. Here you see in a book from the Netherlands at 1820, which was the cadastral book. Information in the land register, however, is the title holder, the types of titles, restrictions, servitudes, encompasses, etc. And most of the time also a deed of the transfer of a property. Together they form the land administration, you could say. And sometimes we also then have a cadastral map, which is a graphical representation of the parcel, the boundaries, a building, as you see here in this example, a map of 1820, and some basic topography. When we have precise boundaries, we call it a cadastral map, and when it are general boundaries, not precisely established, then we call it an index map. Well, data gathering, we have also seen in the presentation of Chrissy that we need a lot of data. And you can add more, like real estate objects, legal owners, informal constructions, number of people in a certain area or in a house, quality of the houses, etc. And the data can be textual and graphical. Well, how to acquire data? There are two options. Reuse existing data, which is of course very handy. If needed, if strictly needed, I would say, collect new data. It's important to see what sources are already available because there are so many data sets. In the Netherlands, we talk about 150,000 different data sets. So there is more than one thing. So one can also exploit more from what is already there. To do so, it's more cheap and more quick. We will have also a look at the key registers and why do we need them. First, an example of how acquiring data. Here we make use of an aerial photo where the individual dwellings are identified. And then we can easily add information. For instance, whether an object is under construction in the yellow dot, or whether tax has been paid, the green dot, of course. When the object is not yet registered and tax is not paid, we give it a dark red dot. And when it is registered formally, but tax is not paid, we can give it a purple dot. It is just an example, but this is very easy to make. It can be more easy by involving the crowd. In the Netherlands, we have several options. Here you see the monuments for the boundaries from the Netherlands. And in the early days, one of our staff would make a travel along all these border points. That was costly and time-consuming. Now we ask the public, hikers and walkers, to report when a monument is not in a good shape. Well, that's of course very much easier. Or when the cadastral map is not in a good quality, we can ask the people to report on mistakes. So this example shows you below. We prepared a special application for that. So quality of data is very important, and especially when we talk about the key registers. This is an overview of all data sets you can think of. And you see two squares, the state registers, with a special sort of state registers that are the key registers, which are under a legal regime. The land administration data sets can be either state registers, or if they are already under this legal regime of key registers, they can be considered as key register. But there are many more data sets which can be of use from the municipality, various institutes, universities, private sector, but also the National Bureau of Statistics has, of course, a wealth of information available. And to complicate this picture a bit more, we also can talk about NSDI, the data which refers to spatial information, which is also bound to the EU directive in Europe. So the NSDI can be a state register, or it can also be a data set from the municipality, institutes, university, etc., which you just called. So there are so many data that it is worthwhile to make a good study of it before acquiring new data. A quick view on the system of key registers, which is also addressed in one of the lectures. Important is that all these data sets, key registers, are linked, that they are under a legal regime, that there is a custodian who is responsible for the quality, and that government institutes making use of these data are obliged to report back when there are mistakes in these data sets so that they can be corrected. We have data sets on the company, which is the National Business Register, on persons, which is the National Population Register, buildings, addresses, but also on the property and the title and the location. Together, the land administration is under the regime of key registers and maintained by Cadasta. And also the tax value of a property is a key register. So implementing, where to start? Well, it is very important to determine priorities in what data to collect and also at what quality. Make sure that all stakeholders have their input, because the custodian is not only responsible for his own data, but also for other stakeholders. Then it's now important to see what really is needed for supporting Building Back Better. And it's important to working towards a national spatial data infrastructure, which will also be one of the topics of the presentation of Darko Vucetic. And then building a system of key registers is not simple. In the Netherlands, we took 20 years. So who can take the lead in the governance, the Minister of Interior or Housing or Environment, and who will be responsible for the action? What can be the role of the Land Registry and Cadasta Agency? We are already owner of the ownership information, titles, object, and map. So the agency can be the coordinator, but a separate body to coordinate all activities can be an alternative. And how shall it be financed? It can be the private sector, the public sector, or a combination in PPPs. Income can be generated by taxation, fees, charges, and contributions. And all this should be part of the legal regime under which these key registers are established. Well, the fit-for-purpose approach was already referred to if it comes to formalization of illegal properties, but it can also be applied in the land administration. In this case, I would not say that it is purely for building a land administration, because there are already land administrations in all of the Balkan countries, but it can also be used for evaluation of the existing system. We have three important blocks: the spatial framework, the legal framework, and the institutional framework. And the spatial framework is about aerial imageries countrywide, but also on the participatory field adjudication or on how to formalize. So that is a part of the spatial framework. Important is to keep it simple, because that is fit for purpose, and define your basic requirements in an early stage. And then make it not better than required, because exports comes with features and all kinds of promises, but stick to what you have set as the priority requirements. So improve the legal framework because it should be inclusive, transparent, and as simple as possible. And a very good example I always see in Australia. They consider this land administration as just an administration, no humbug and no interference of courts, etc. The law on legalization and formalization, and we have already seen many examples in the Balkans, especially also for formalization. Special attention to the legal position and the institutional setting. The law should define the contours of the land registry and the cadastre. And pay attention to the dissemination of information, because that should be freely available and preferably also free of charge. And then improve the institutional framework. Define the role of the land registry and cadastre. Well, preferably in one agency, but if not, make sure that there is a good partnership between the land registry and the cadastre. Define the role of all the actors, and there are so many: notaries, lawyers, surveyors, courts, etc. And describe the organizational setup, like in this graphic from Greece. Identify what expertise is needed and in what volume. Building or improving a land register and a cadastre, we should start with defining, but in most cases redefining the process of registration, including the role of all actors. Register all real estate objects, no matter what status. We should strive to 100% coverage. So even if an object is informal, we should say just register it and collect the titles in a systematic way. Record the status, whether it is informal or illegal, or maybe when there is no building permit or living permit, I would say leave that to the municipality, but just make sure that all the information is there. Make also sure that there is a unique key to define each parcel. But not only the parcels, also apartment buildings and the apartments in the building. Make use of a municipality information on buildings, users and metadata. And all information should be, of course, in digital form. Nowadays, I think that is not anymore an issue. But pay ample attention to the IT design of the database and the functionality, and do that in line with all the needs of all the stakeholders. And then make a cadastral map. Also, a map is available in most of the countries already. If it is not complete, make use of information at municipal level or even at the private sector. Centimeter precision for mapping of boundaries is not required, so keep also that simple and make use of aerial photographs. An index map covers most of the time the needs, so precision is not always required. In apartment buildings, of course, the boundaries are clear, but pay attention to the land plot, the common spaces and the common utilities. Map in digital form also here. And of course, you can make use of standard GIS systems in the market, like GeoMedia, ArcGIS, MapInfo, but there is also open source. Aerial photographs, by the way, a specific national data set for identification and delimitation of parcels, but serving also building back better needs. Assure consistency between Cadasta, land registry, and cadastral map. This is quite essential because tenure security is based on this approach. Okay, I will not dwell too much on the building register and address register, also because of the time, but they are considered as quite trivial registered, but they are so important because address register makes sure that you can make a reference to a building or a person in a unique way. So these registers not only serve the land administration, but also the formalization process and also the recovering action plan. So let's try to wrap up. Tenure security is a basic condition for economic development, but also for the general rule of law, but also, again, for formalization process. Land administration is a crucial infrastructure serving many goals. So to pay attention to land administration will be, I think, a priority before starting anything else. Property data should be very reliable. Maybe it's overdone to say it, but you cannot overdo it, and therefore we urge for the key registers. Pay attention to the registers as building and addresses. For building or improving a land administration, use the fit for purpose methodology and keep the land administration simple. Build what is strictly needed and stick to the requirements. Do it in an incremental way and have a step-by-step approach ready. You cannot do all at once. And make sure that all stakeholders are involved in the design of functionality and the available information, both of the registers and the maps. And seek for best practices and international support. And we have seen in the Balkan that there is a lot of cooperation between the countries, supported by the EU, but also by the Netherlands and Sweden. And I think that is a very good example of doing things together and share best practices. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rick, for this very thorough analysis and how land registration and cadastre can help in the recovery. This wraps up the first part of this workshop with very interesting presentations by Stephen Neustrom on the importance of connectedness between RAP strategy, framework, and cross-cutting themes. Chrissy's presentation, Professor Potsiu's presentation on the importance of the guidelines for formalization of informal construction, and the integration of the recovery action plan, and your presentation, Rick. We'll take 5 minutes now for a break. We'll be back in 5 minutes, and then we move on with the experiences that we'll hear from the city of Podgorica, as well as from Serbia, to better understand what is happening on the ground with the cases of both from Serbia and Podgorica. Before that, we'll have a Q&A. So we'll start after the break with the Q&A, and then we move on to the cases. Thank you very much. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
Hey, Amy. Very briefly, Amy, Matteo, could I try sharing my screen real quickly and just to see whether or not that works for the, as a practice run?
I mean, yeah, we can try, but it really just, it always depends on the time and place and the spinning of the earth, but yeah.
I'm trying to figure out what.
The questions that we had in the audience. So I'm opening the floor to the audience, to the participants for the questions. And I'm also asking my colleague Matteo to join me in one of the most important elements that I think came up during the presentations in the comments that we got. Matteo?
Yes, one of the things that emerged in the discussion in the chat and also transversally in most of the presentations we just heard is the topic of incentives, is the topic of how to bring people successfully on the side of formalization. And this could be one first question that we could present to all the participants, our three experts, Steve, Chrissy, and Rick, about how they see this, this question, this issue, what have been so far strategies that seem to work. And then maybe with this, we get a little bit of the ball rolling on the discussion also with the audience.
So Stephen, Rick, and Chrissy, incentives, the question of incentives.
Chrissy, do you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay, you mean incentive, we say property titles, or in general to participate into improvement reforms, in neighborhood reforms and all that, to increase the density in the urban areas and etc., to build from 3 to 4 floor houses, multi-story apartments, and resettle the people inside there. This is the major issue, because we formalize as such the informal settlement now, but this does not mean that the people will stay there forever like this, to have single family houses or 2 or 3 floor only for their family, because the city is a living organization. And in order to keep the economy of city going, then we have to have tools that we will facilitate the income of more people and to be able to host more people there. So we need the private sector there to participate, the constructors. We need to have agreements with the owners, those that they have formalized, with the constructors also, and the state should be the one to put the rules for the agreements, and to also to ensure the transparency and the fairness, and up to that. And then the owners, together with the private sector, will be able to make the agreement. And of course, what is needed is that the state should increase the floor ratio there, and to increase the rules for the regulations for increasing the density, and to take care of the provision of green areas on the ground floor, etc., the parking spaces, etc. But in the meantime, the owners, first of all, they have to believe that this is fair. What I mean that they have to enter this land reform with their property, the value of their property, and to get out of that with equal value or even a little bit more. This is what I mean, the incentive, a little bit more. Whatever it is, we call it urban land consolidation projects, or we may call it differently, whatever we want, or any land reform or development, any development. You may not need to do urban land consolidation in a broad area, but to consolidate a few parcels and a few buildings so that you will make a better development. Anything, people should be able to enter with their value and get out with their value, equal value, or even a little bit more. So the rules are there like this. And when the people realize that the construction lifetime is not forever, and the constructions that they have already made are mostly self-made, they need to be improved. They get old. The economic value of their property is deteriorating as time goes. So they have to understand, and the state has to raise awareness that it is for their benefit to exchange, to get in voluntarily into such a scheme, and to be able, after a while, to get a better property of equal value, different shape, different place, but in the same neighborhood, of equal or even higher value, and the neighbor will be improved and everything will be modernized, and the economic life of their property will be extended.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Kirsi. We don't have much time left for the question and answer. Maybe I can give the floor to Mrs. Rina Ivancevic from the Ministry of Environment, who had raised her hand in case you have a question. Mrs. Ivancevic? No, maybe Stephen or Rick, if you have, meanwhile, any insight on the incentives. You want to share with us very shortly.
Rick, can I touch real quickly? I'll be very fast. Chrissy, you covered that very well. The question, I think, there are two levels to that question. And the first one was, if you are taking land and building a whole new development, which for those 3 new city centers, that's a very different question, and in that case, you really are taking land from a lot of people. And as Chrissy pointed out, you do have to incentivize people to do that, or else you're likely to get public backlash. And whether you incentivize them, so yes, giving back the same amount or maybe a little bit better, whether they're cash incentives, quality incentives, size incentives, or another incentives, or even giving them multiple options is the way to go in a situation like that. And from country to country, it's going to vary. The most appropriate response and how people are going to accept it's going to vary from place to place, and it's tricky. As far as for formalization goes, that is going to, once again, that's going to vary from informal settlement to informal settlement. Formalization doesn't necessarily have to involve much of that at all in many formalization processes, depending on the city.
Thank you very much, Stephen. Rick, very shortly, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, maybe very short. If we see an individual house owner with an informal property, he is not able to get a mortgage, for instance. So when this property is formalized, he can go to the bank and he can get some money. So with this money, he can upgrade his house, for instance. And I think that is already a great incentive. And this pays, in fact, the formalization process to a large extent. And we have seen examples where only the formalization of houses made sure that these houses tripled in price, so also that is an incentive. The collateral is more important after formalization.
Thank you very much, Rick. Thank you. I think that the question of incentives is extremely important. We'll come back hopefully at the end on this point. But I want to give the floor to the policymakers and city representatives of the city of Podgorica, taking stock once again on the implementation of Recovery Action Plan and how, through the experience of the city of Podgorica, the assessment report and the using of the Recovery Action Plan, we can come up with a better understanding of how things are unfolding on the ground. I give the floor to Mr. Milan Barovic. Please, the floor is yours, Head of Secretariat of Spatial Planning and Sustainable Development, Municipality of Podgorica. The floor is yours, Mr. Barovic.
Thank you, Mr. Hijazi. At the beginning, I would like to greet you all on behalf of the City of Podgorica and the Secretariat for the Spatial Planning and Sustainable Development. As many know that are present in this webinar today, especially my colleagues from ministries in Montenegro, it is known fact that illegal construction is one of the biggest problems in our city, and our city is facing this problem for the last 30 years. It's present in almost all parts of our city, whether if we are talking about additions to existing buildings or new buildings or any other types of illegal constructions. The very fact that over 13,000 requests for legalizations were submitted to our secretary speaks of the wide distribution of this phenomena in Podgorica. Awareness of the citizens of our city about these problems varies from case to case. There are citizens who have completed the entire procedure of legalization despite demanding administrative procedures, while on the other hand, we have a high percentage of requests that were submitted without any relevant data and the required documentation. There are 5 or 6 separate settlements of illegal construction in Podgorica, but it is, as I said, present in almost all parts of the city. In the assessment report, Susanna made a great analysis of one settlement in the northern part of the city, and it's called Park Shuma Zagorec. In English, Park Shuma means park forest, so you can assume what was present in this area before all building activities. The settlement was completely built illegally during the 90s and this millennium. Some land in the area of the Park Shuma Zagorec is privately owned, while many houses are built on the land-owned city-owned land. Detailed urban plan for this area is made in 2018, and most of the buildings are kept by this planning document. So these people have the opportunity to access the procedure of legalization and purchase of the land. I want to let you know about some things about the procedure of the legalization in Montenegro. So first question that comes in mind is the price of the process of the legalization for the citizens of Podgorica and other citizens in Montenegro. In Montenegro, in the process of the legalization, citizens pay a special fee for urban remediation, which is further invested in equipping these illegal settlements. This year, about 900,000 euros were paid into a special budget account of the capital city by the people who legalized their structures. Numerous reductions in payments are defined for special categories of the population, such as the primary basic housing facilities by 50%, for users entitled to social housing 90%, for example. The deductions are also given for one-time payment also. Just now we are in the process of the making of the program of urban remediation. That is a yearly program by which the city capital is defining the parts of the city that will be equipped by this fee for urban remediation. Through the legalization procedure in Montenegro, state-owned land can be purchased in installments. During this year today, we have exceeded the projected revenues with about 900,000 euros, as I said, while the agreed amount is about 1.5 million euros. This amount will be invested in improving of the living conditions in these areas. So one more important thing that should be said in this presentation is that in Montenegro, new laws regulating the area of planning, construction, and legalization are being drafted, which are expected to define more efficient procedure for legalization on the one hand, but also provide protection on the other hand, especially when it comes to particularly valuable areas and segments of the space. The board for spatial planning with the Union of Municipality of Montenegro sent suggestion to Ministry for Ecology, Spatial Planning and Urbanism in which direction some of the most important legal solutions should be defined. So you may not know, but right now the planning documents in Montenegro are made by the state. Local planning documents, local state planning documents are made by the state. So one of the main suggestions that we sent to the ministry is that the planning documentation should be done by municipalities with the possibility of forming city agencies that will draft and adopt planning documents. Also, we sent the suggestion that the process of legalization should be simplified, especially when it comes to the conditions of the legalization, and that legalization should be the subject of the spatial and separate law, which right now is not the case. When we are talking about problems, and I want to conclude with the problems that we are facing in the process of legalizations, I wrote them on the one paper. There are many problems, but I want to emphasize some of them. So this is the main problems with the process of legalization in Montenegro. So no planning document has been adopted that would define the final verdict of all facilities that can and cannot be legalized. So the procedure for a large number of requests is right now paused and on hold. Inspection is not efficient enough, so the illegal building activities are not fully prevented. Insufficient awareness of citizens regarding the harmful effects of illegal construction, lack of interest of the media, NGOs, and political parties for the final solution of this issue in Montenegro. Mechanisms for involving citizens in the proceedings are not well defined, in particular penal mechanisms, immigration of the population from other parts of the country, Podgorica, and new housing, with the reduction of agricultural and green areas. Also, we are facing problem with lack of mapping and data regarding this issue. So I can conclude at the end that the recommendations that are given by the assessment report that is made by Ms. Susan Estijević are well defined and provide suggestions for solutions to these problems in the future. I must emphasize that there are a lot of people that did not enter this process of legalization in Montenegro. So we must work in the future on the questions how we can involve more and more people in Montenegro in the process of legalization. So that's the basically some of the informations about the process of legalization in Podgorica. So I'm here for your question and any and I'm at your service for giving any other information and additional info on this matter. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Varouch. This is a very interesting insight. Once again, bringing us back to the question of incentives and how to get the greater number of people involved in the process. I want to give the floor now to our colleagues and friends from Republic of Serbia, Dr. Darko Vučetić, Head of Center of Geospatial Information Management from Republic Geodetic Authority. The floor is yours, Darko. Please share with us your insights, reflection on the implementation of the COVID-19 action plan in the Republic of Serbia.
Hello, everybody. Greetings to all. Thank you for having me here. I hope that you see my presentation.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, great. So my presentation for today, it's, I think, very well fit with today's topic. But, while I'm, hearing all these experts, especially Rick, Steven, and Chrissy, I wanted to change many things in my presentation because it's so complex, theme that, we can talk about each of the sentence from them, in a days. But let's present myself first. Actually, my institution. My institution is Republic Geodetic Authority. And we are in charge for many things. This is the 10, let's say, the most important data sets for good governance, and we are in charge for everything. Basically, what is maybe interesting to underline right now, in line with the presentation from Rick, that we are in charge for Cadastra part, land register part, land mapping part, but also about national spatial data infrastructure. We are main coordinator, and many other things. All these things actually helped us during the COVID time to help our government and market and the society to manage that as easy as possible, and to real estate market to be flexible enough to save the year, let's say, in this difficult time. But let's talk about land administration. We are also, the biggest part of land administration, and like Rick said, it's a most important part for this today's topic. So just a short reminder, land administration is by the fella. It's a process for determining, recording, disseminating, and updating information about relationship between people and land. But we, as a, let's say, national mapping and cadastral and land registry agency, we always forget that national mapping, that our institution are in charge for recording, disseminating, and updating information, but not the determination of the rights. Determination of the rights are defined somewhere else, such as courts, various ministries, municipalities, notaries, enforced people, and so on and so on. So in global, you have two parts of the system. So property ownership, which is in most countries that I visited and I studied, it's constitutional rights, okay, and property registration and management, for the rights, for all the things that we already mentioned. And this is simply as that, the very straightforward process, and it should be technically solved, in this land administration and land registry, this but for some reason, and I think that the reason is that the property itself is not the focus of in this, but the ownership. We have in Serbia at least more than 50 laws which is defining this gap between property ownership and property registration. And there are many laws that is complicated all these things, and those laws actually determines the rights of the property. And there are only two the laws for recording, dissemination, and updating information of the rights. And everybody in Serbia and Europe-wide, when they are talking about the problem and issue, that they are actually referring to these more than 50 laws, because all issue regarding those rights which are linked in process of determination becoming visible and known when it comes time for registration and process. So blaming national mapping authorities for these kind of issues is like blaming the weighted scale because I got weight got few kilos during the COVID, but it's not the essence. So this is the one process, business process in Serbia in the Cadastral agency. So this is not cartoon. This is map processes based on these more than 50 laws, which determines the right that I mentioned. So legal framework in Serbia were completely analog. those are business processes. Actually, just to explain, this is the single apply at the Cadastral office for citizens, private companies, or public agency, and this is situation in all sectors. So the laws itself are completely analog, and it's not following, you know, the new business processes and new, let's say, digitalization. So to digitize this kind of madness, you know, it leads to more madness, and it's not efficient to all. So we need to change many things in order to be efficient, like market, like society, like our citizens, you know, requires. Why I'm talking about this? Because this is the situation in every single law and every single sector in Serbia. And it's not about informal properties in Serbia. There are no exception at all. So the first law in legislation started 25 years ago, and over the past couple of decades, we you know tried several times to solve this big issue. But all attempts, let's say, you know, partly succeed. Don't want to say that failed, because beside other reasons, beside the analog approach and so on, decision makers had wrong information and wrong data. It was estimated at the very beginning that there are only few 100,000 illegal objects, then million, then 1.5, and this is just rough estimation. You know, from the local municipalities, from the other institutions, and so on and so on. And then in 2015 and 2016, we acquired very high resolution imagery, satellite imagery, and those satellite images showed that there are more than 4.5 million buildings and properties that are not registered in the system of real estate cadastre in Serbia. I will just remind you that the population of Serbia is around 7 million. So this lack of information preventing actually, you know, efficient decision making, but also this issue preventing efficient urban and spatial planning, leading to the wrong decision, but accumulating problems more and more over time. This changes everything what we planned for the process of formalization in 2015, especially about the business processes itself. But potential are huge. You know, according to the recent socioeconomic study for geospatial data and information done in 2020, thanks to our colleagues from Leuven Institute, we estimated that there are around 28 billion euros, you know, waiting as a debt capital, because in Serbia it's not possible to sell or buy informal properties, and it's completely unuseful. And loss from unpaid taxes. It was hard for us to estimate, but it's around 127 million euros per year. You know, I was always wondering in the past. I need to admit that I was always wondering why our institution should be in charge for mass valuation or to taking care about this, because you know there are other institutions. But this is actually the proof that only we, as a part of land administration and national mapping and cadastral authority, you know, are able and capable to do that in the proper way, and also to include these properties that are not you know, under taxation process right now. And this is not possible also to get access to the utilities infrastructure if you're not formal and in Serbia. So, you know, there are many studies in Serbia recently done why we are so, you know, we have these kind of problems, and many NGOs try to document and learn lessons and provide some recommendation. But all recommendation, you know, conclusion was always the same. We need new solution, new concept for legislation, because in this way it will take, I don't know, decades or maybe you know it will not be solved at all. And when we discussed about how to solve this, the conclusion and the recommendation looks like this. You know, of course, this is looks familiar. And because it is your, you know, work from people that are, you know, today with us, and from guidelines of the formalization and formal construction. But I can bet that we came with similar conclusion, more harder way than the authors, and we are living this problem, you know, every day. So thank you for this summarizing all these solution and guidelines and the track how it should be done. And there are many the recommendation and documents that we should refer to. And for my opinion of my institution that we are working with is that new concept for formalization need to be based on these documents. Because it is only documents that is dealing with the property and not about something else and complicated. So the post-recovery database is the post-recovery action plan is the way how it should be done, reflecting the current situation, and that's why we in Serbia we started a big reform of land administration in 2016. And this is the hardest, let's say, the most complicated reform in the country. Why? Because there are many others, the potential sectors and stakeholders, beneficiary, and so on. And the reform in this, in our case, is always the fight and conflict between inherited, entropy, the interested groups who have the benefits from this crazy, situation, and also about mentality. But do you remember this spaghetti example? So we managed in a couple of years with changing the policy, laws and procedures and technology to streamline and to simplify the business processes. And now from in the past it was 49 just for registration, and now it takes 4 days for registration. Also, we introduced new services, a new front desk. As soon as we sorted out and solve all the issue with the data, then we were able to launch this e-front desk, which is central point for all communication with other stakeholders and other institutions and partners within the government and outside of the government, such as notary enforcers, advocates, banks, insurance, municipalities, etc. And now it's going very fast and very unstructured way. So it's from end to end, it's digital. Also, we introduced new geospatial platform which has more than 330 public data sets from the public institutions, and it's very popular not only from the government of Serbia but also to the people. One of the examples, we have many data, for example, linked in with each other. Beside digital cadastral plans and so on, we have also informal, actually illegal objects. We have utility cadastre, underground assets, and many other things based on for spatial movement plans and so on and so on. And thanks to crowdsourcing, for example, which Rick mentioned, we managed to improve the address register, which is key register for everything, for e-government and so on, and only in 1.5 years. But I want to underline that informal construction affected the quality of the other important registers, such as this address register. Why? In the past we actually hide under the law, and we pretended to be blind and to say, okay, this is something that is formal. The informal buildings we don't recognize because we are just dealing with the official registers. But if we did on that way, we will never complete address register at all. So we included in the system. We gave the addresses for that, and that helped us during the COVID, for example. In Serbia, there are the 2 different working bodies that is dealing with health and social economic recovery, and all these data and services and critical system were critical during the COVID time for geospatial data. We actually managed in the end to weekly report on the real estate market thanks to mass valuation process and the real estate and price register. And we actually provided to the decision makers from the government, but also to the private sector, very valuable information about status of real estate market in order to help them to change the policy, to change the attitudes and so on, in order to help. In the end, we were, thanks to these electronic services, we were able to recover the number of transactions and the real estate market only in 1 month, because it was decreased from the best year in the history, 2019, by the minus 80%. And in March, where is the lockdown, and after 1 month, we managed to reach plus 30% and to say the year, which in the end in 2020 was the best year for some markets. But prevention of the informal lands, informal buildings are essential, I think. Today we launched new satellite images from 2020. So if you compare 2016 and this new one, you can see the differences are huge, more than 20%. So it's around new 1 million, buildings in 4 years. I don't say that they are all informal. There are some of the constructions and so on, but if you compare the marks, you will see the big differences. So this prevention and monitoring, constant monitoring, is the crucial thing. So we, as a government, we are starting a new e-space project as a part of European digital space, which is sorted out all the data, which is actually a foundation of this national spatial data infrastructure, and it will link all the production, databases, and it will be used for an efficient urban and spatial planning. It will be used for prevention and further, to provide decision maker with the proper data, information, and the system itself. But the precondition of this, it's to change and to simplify legal background, legal framework, to be more digital in order to be successful. Sorry. So thank you for your attention. I hope that I managed to reflect our work. But of course, I'm here, so I'm looking forward for your question and debates in the end of the workshop. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vucetic. This is a very, again, insightful laying of the ground and what's happening on the ground in the Republic of Serbia in terms of decomplexifying and streamlining from the position of legal framework, but also beyond. I'm very glad also to see that the work that has been done by our experts have been very useful and help you to move ahead with your agenda. I would like now to give to open the floor to the discussion. I saw your hands raised, Chrissy. Why don't we start with you if you had one element to add to the presentation that we just heard from Darko?
Yes, I just wanted to tell to Darko that we also learned the hard way before being able to write down the guidelines. Because here in Greece, we face a lot of such problems. So from the very early times of my professional career, I've been dealing with this informal construction. And also through traveling all over the world, I have talked to residents of informal settlements in Africa. And what is impressive is that they said, do not bring us any more blankets or food. We want you to help us in empowering our property titles. We want to have legal ownership titles. This is the important thing all over the world. It's not because I say so, it's because everybody now has realized that property titles are empowering people, residents of informal settlements. And this also helps for COVID.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chrissy. Any questions that the audience have on the city, the cases that has been exposed to us from the city of Tirana, Podgorica, and the Republic of Serbia? Please come in and raise your hand or use the chat function, please. And meanwhile, if I may start with a question, unless I cannot see all the questions.
We have a question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes, hello.
Yes, hello. Please go ahead.
Yeah, I am Jovanovski from the Ministry of Transport and Communication from the Republic of Macedonia. And unfortunately, we are deeply in this, how can I say, project of the legalization or making the legal in legal settlement. That means that we have very big experience in this, especially when we must overlook the existing situation in the new plan. Sometimes this is very, very impossible. That means that only collateral damage is on the back on the state. I'm not against this because the state maybe is more guilty for for this situation, not only in but I think every state in the world, because they leave the people to build, of course, informal. I think that for us in Balkan will be never-ending story, because from our experience, we see that all the time in the political situation, everybody used to how can I say, to stretch this time for this process. And if you stretch this process, sorry, am I on the line? Hello?
Yes, please wrap up your comments, please.
Yeah, sorry, because I didn't see. Okay, if every government stretch this process, that means that like example in Serbia, from every year we have a new 500,000, 10,000, 1 million new buildings. And this is for me what is the problem of this process.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, one sentence in the end. That will be very complicated for the planners, because the planners all the time start to make the new tools or the new measures to include these buildings, and in the end, the planners will be, in the end, they will be collateral damage of this process. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have a question from Tea Habazaj. Please share with us your question.
Hello.
Good evening.
I'm the representative of the municipality of Tirana, and I want to thank you, Ljubio, the colleague, for the question that he made now, and also in the comments. I want to firstly say that the areas that are highest damage from the earthquake are mostly informal and not urbanized areas. So in addition, expropriation of these mostly informal and low-cost buildings means that they will be provided with living space and that are in compliance with the national and international standards. So we have low construction, poor functionality, and we give instead requalified neighborhoods. Those areas not only offer mixed functional neighborhoods like cultural and institutional buildings, but also high standard of living, and brings this citizen near to the city center. We want to clarify that the initiative for the post-earthquake redevelopment areas does not indicate that the individual houses owner who live outside those areas cannot rebuild their own houses. They can apply for rebuilding permits, which are omitted from taxation. They are acquired with fund or grants that covers the building cost. I want to thank you all.
Thank you very much. Any other question that we have in the chat for our presenter or the cases? Okay. So this will, I would like to give the floor maybe Matteo, taking stock of what we all heard today from the presenters, experts, but also the cases that we had from Tirana, Podgorica, and the Republic of Serbia in terms of the recovery action plan, and also how to move ahead in the context of rightly so, Darko, you mentioned complexity, and I used the transition from spaghetti to tagliatelle without making a joke with the culinary culture of Matteo, complexity and how we can move ahead.
Thank you, Alex. I will try to summarize what I see as 3 key points that emerged today in the discussion, then maybe leave the floor to our 3 experts for our last 1-minute comment each, and then close our discussion. Three of the things that I saw emerging very strongly today, that I think will be key in progressing this project. I shall remind the audience that this is an ongoing project with many parts, and it's an organic effort that has been going on for quite a few years now, and now is producing many initiatives. I shall remind you that the online platform will be populated with teaching and learning materials to deepen the knowledge of this aspect. So one of the things that has emerged to me, especially from the local experiences, and also from some of the remarks we just heard, is the need to build some form of shared knowledge, which is one of the imperatives of this very project. So a sort of reference point, so that when we speak of the same things, we understand all what we are dealing with, and what we are talking about. So building shared knowledge, taking stock of local experiences, to me is one of the main objectives of what we are doing today and across this project. The second topic that I see as key is the topic of how to lower and slash the cost of acquiring data without compromising too much the quality of the data that we need. Because of course, we can all get cheap data, but then it's bad data. And if it's bad data, a lot of the local presentation, but also what Chrissy, Stephen, and Rick have underscored, is that bad data leads to bad decision making. Bad decision making leads to everybody being unhappy. However, high quality data can be very expensive. And we have heard today about crowdsourcing and also about some new developments with satellite images, and also our three presenters in different ways all mentioned about this problem of finding the right balance with this. And I think that this is a topic that is well worth exploring with very focused content about methods of getting specific kinds of data with the best possible price to value ratio. Crowdsourcing works for some kinds of data, not for others, not in all contexts, for example. So it's very interesting to me. It's a very interesting and worthwhile topic to pursue. And the third point that I would like to raise is that there seems to be an overall need to explore ways to streamline the legal framework and the business framework. And this is where I'm going to finish, and a topic that I would like to throw to our three experts and also our local presenters for a last comment, because changing the legal framework is almost by definition a long-term initiative. So it takes a long time to transform it. And I'm wondering how this fits with the emergency response perspective of the recovery action plan. So that we need to get things going very fast. Policy frameworks tend to change very slowly over time. So I'm wondering if there would be insights to share from our experts about this specific problem in a last round of comments. And in closing, let me thank very much all the experts and presenters that today very generously shared their knowledge and their very insightful experiences. As we build the online platform, the knowledge about informality, formalization, and the recovery action plan can only benefit from a very in-depth assessment of local situations, which we encourage you to keep sharing with us in future workshops, but also with other means that we can discuss after this workshop. With this, I would leave the floor to our three experts, Chrissy, Stephen, and Rick, for a last round of comments, which will take us to 5 p.m. and then we are going to close. Thank you very much for your attention. Stephen, Chrissy, Rick, who wants to start? Stephen, please.
Okay, I want to start with a quick answer to Matteo's question, so I hope the other panelists will get a little bit more depth. Part of the decision making as to what are tier 1 and tier 2 responses is to prioritize, and maybe what you're suggesting is prioritizing for speed and efficiency. So that is one of the things that needs to be considered. I wanted to touch on the other questions very briefly as well. For Tirana, your discussion pointed out why you actually, because there was a lot of text about why there might be resistance to your 3 city plans. I think you pointed out a good reason why you may actually face very little resistance, because you're actually bringing them much better quality at the end and much more useful space. So I think you covered that one yourself. For Macedonia and Serbia, the key question here was, why is formality keeping growing so quickly? And how do you stop that if you can't formalize fast enough? And the first question that has to be answered is, what is the cause of your formality, or what are the causes? Symptoms and causes are very different. You really do need to know which is which. Once you understand what the causes are, you can then identify, maybe there's 4 causes for one country and 3 causes in the other that produce 70% or 90% of your informality. Then you can address those causes specifically. So that would be individual discussions, and the answer is going to be different in each country. So I can't answer that for you now, but that's how you do it. That's how you find the answer. And lastly, for Montenegro, your question was how to get more participation. And it's a very similar answer. Why, first question you have to answer is, why aren't they participating? Identify the 3, 4, 5 reasons why they aren't participating. Once you understand that, you can solve the problem. And I'll pass it on then. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Chrissy, Rick?
Okay, maybe I'd say a few words, or Chrissy. Well, I think it was an interesting topic you raised, Matteo, the legal framework, because we see the spaghetti emerges from this legal framework around property. And what I often hear is, if you like to change something, then they say, well, the law does not allow us to do so. We have to consider that the law should help us organizing things and not blockading and frustrating things. So it needs some courage in general to change the law and not to be too anxious to make changes. We see that by time, requirements in society are changing. So it's very natural that the law and the legal framework should also change. A long time ago in the Netherlands, we had a tub to do our shower, and later on we found a bathroom more than a basic need. So that is what we see happening. And now with COVID-19, there's a new dimension. So I would say whatever is needed should be realized, and let's not let us be frustrated or blocked by the law. Let's change the law in the way we need it. That is what I maybe like to say about this legal framework.
Thank you, Rick. Very, very precious. Chrissy, you have the closing remarks.
Darko, when we were writing the guidelines, it was some years ago. Now I'm more wise. Because I was involved in a World Bank project for our Cadasta, and I realized how complicated legal problems we have and how the problems through the legal way. So at the end, I suggested that we should use mitigation procedures. In many times, when the neighbors agree to solve the problem, the legal problem, then we should allow them to make a formal mitigation and then take a decision and then agree and then go ahead and register, regardless to what the legal framework says. Because it is difficult to go to the court and take decisions of the court that even decisions of the court cannot be implemented correctly. And then we have even more complicated issues and they drive you mad. So mitigation is a way. I hope that it is a way that we should allow, and this is what I have added in this presentation today, the mitigation. Now, of course, I realize that there are some legal issues that are very strict, and we do need a serious legal reform. And yeah, I hope that you don't have as many as we have here. Yes, this is one thing. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is that crowdsourcing is useful because also we collect information that we cannot collect the normal way. I think this is the biggest value of crowdsourcing, especially for the pandemic and such things. So we have to think positively and we have to include it. Now, how to minimize the phenomenon of informal construction in future is something else that we have not addressed in the guidelines, because it is building back better our tools, our property registration, our planning, our permitting, blah, blah, blah. And this is a hard thing and long term. This is a topic of another research at the moment. I understand that the need is big and the people go ahead and build informally. One thing is to improve your private sector and professional ethics and standardization of procedures and everything. You have to focus a little bit more on the private sector, so that the constructors will not focus only to build very expensive constructions for the rich people, but also to see what are the needs and to satisfy the needs of the people. This is a challenge. Yes.
Thank you so much, Christine. I think we ran out of time. Thank you so much.
I hope we will have time for discussions more in future.
Indeed, this is where I wanted to end. So consider this an open forum and not just a workshop. So please, to all participants, be in touch, spread the words. We really need your inputs, we need your discussions, and we need your experiences. You will receive information about the online platform with follow-up emails. We thank you all very much, and thanks to UNECE, thanks to Amy and Enkel for organizing and running this workshop. And we look forward to seeing you all and engaging you all to build back better in the near future. Thank you very much, and have a nice evening, everybody.
We thank Amy and Alexander and Matteo and all the rest. And good luck and
thank
take
you,
care.
everyone. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Thank you for your input. Thank you all. Thank you, Enkel.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good day, everyone.